Okay, we left off with Jesus' ministry in Galilee and them bringing all these people that were sick and demonized and epileptics and paralytics and everybody, various diseases, it says, and he healed them. He just healed them. You know, it wasn't like he selected a few here and a few there and you get one here, one there. This was incredible. I mean, everyone that was brought to him was getting healed. This you can only imagine what that would do to a region. And then as the news goes out, what it would do with people coming from all over the place. And so we pick up in chapter 5, and this is a amazing next 3 chapters. It's probably the longest sermon of Jesus that we have recorded. And it really gives us the principles of his kingdom. And we see that this kingdom that's coming is a lot different than the kingdom that's been. It's different than the kingdom of this world. The way that he says that the things that are blessed in this kingdom and the way that we react in this kingdom and the way we should pray in this kingdom are so much different than what's been heard up to this point. And so it starts in chapter 5. In verse 1, it says, "And when he saw the multitudes, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him," verse 2, "and opening his mouth, he began to teach them, saying." So he's up on the mountain, and we call it the Sermon on the Mount, is what we usually refer to these chapters, because he's up on the mountain and he's got the disciples have come to him and begins to teach them, and he teaches them in verses 3 through 12. This is often called the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek or humble, gentle, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, peacemakers, blessed are those who have been persecuted for righteousness' sake. And he says, actually, when you're persecuted for righteousness' sake, for his sake, you're to rejoice and be glad. Even if people say all kinds of evil against you. You know, it's not easy when people say evil against you. I remember watching a television thing when I was working on a campaign, and they said things that seemed, it wasn't even really evil against us, but it was implying that we were kind of ignorant and stupid. And it's hard to watch that on TV and just like, hey, I'm rejoicing and being glad. You know, it was like, what are you talking about? You know, you're yelling at the TV, and the TV can't do anything to help you. But he says to rejoice and be glad in verse 12, because your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Jesus really is not giving a whole lot of hope that you're going to find a whole lot of approval all the time on this earth following him. There's going to be a lot of people that will not understand. They don't move in this way. They don't think the merciful are blessed. They say, you know, put your thumb on them and eliminate your competition. You know, they don't think the meeker will inherit the earth. They think, you know, you got to be forceful and take care and overcome and have wars and overcome your enemies, and you'll inherit the earth. But Jesus said, no, the meek, the humble, the gentle are going to inherit the earth. So this kingdom that he's introducing is so much different than what people think naturally. And he goes on in verse 13, he says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, and I would say that's probably not the greatest translation there, tasteless, is probably become, if the salt will lose its saltiness, how will it be made salty again? It is good for nothing anymore except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. And the reason that I say that is probably not the best translation. If we look ahead, and I'll jump ahead here and we'll probably cover it again in Luke 14, because I might forget that I've covered it already. But in Luke 14, he mentions this salt of the earth message again, and what he says there, a little more revealing, he says, therefore salt is good, but even if it has become tasteless or lost its saltiness, what will it be seasoned? It is useless either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And in Matthew it said it's only good to be trampled underfoot. Here it says it's useless for the soil. Well, if we're talking taste, you know, do you eat a lot of dirt? You know, if it's for taste, you know, it's like, well, I didn't used to like dirt, but I've started using a little salt. Man, it's good. The salt really makes this dirt good. Or the manure pile. You know, is this talking about taste? It's not good for the dirt, or it's not good for the manure pile. You eat a lot of manure, you know, I didn't used to, but I salt it now. Well, that's why I say I don't think this is talking about taste. I think it's talking about not sodium chloride that we use on our tables, but potassium chloride, which is, it's both a fertilizer and a disinfectant. And so I think what he's saying is that if salt has lost its saltness, It's not good for the soil for fertilizing, and it's not good for the manure pile to disinfect it. And salt's just thrown to the ground and be trampled underfoot. And really the only way that salt would lose its saltness is that it's, as it's being harvested, say out of the Dead Sea, they're pulling out this potassium chloride. There's too much sand and silt and other stuff in it. It's too compromised, that the salt isn't pure enough. It's got too much other junk in it. And I think that's a message to us that we can take out of this. If we're filled with too many other things and we're kind of compromised or what would be another word? I don't know. There's just too many other influences in our lives, and we've lost our saltness. We've lost our saltiness. We're not speaking into a situation. We're not living a situation out consistently, and we're not good for anything then except to be thrown out. You don't fertilize. You don't help the good things grow, and you don't stop the bad from growing if you've lost your saltness. And so in a societal way, if we've lost our saltness, we're not helping the good things to progress, and we're not stopping evil from progressing. And so, good message there. I think it's a little different than taste, though, as you see. I don't think a lot of people would like to just salt down their dirt and manure. Anyway. So, verse 17, chapter 5. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. I think this is a key verse here in all of what Jesus is saying and in his mission on the earth. The law is there for, we're told later in the New Testament, not that it can bring not that it can bring life. It's not going to bring you eternal life, because what we found is that all of us, we try to fulfill it and we fail. So it's just there to show us what sin is, and it's also there to lead us to a Savior, we're told later. Well, Jesus came, and he's the one that actually didn't come to just do away with the law. He came to fulfill it. The law is good. The law is perfect. It's righteous. And Jesus came and he fulfilled it. He accomplished it. In verse 18, for truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass away from the law until all is accomplished. And so what Jesus did is he accomplished the law. And what he did, that means he became righteous through the acts of the law. As a man, he was a righteous man, having fulfilled the righteousness according to the law. And so he became qualified for heaven himself, but he also became the only qualified sacrifice for sin, which had to be something pure and holy and righteous, right? We see that in the Old Testament. The sacrifice had to be pure. The sacrifice had to be holy. The sacrifice had to be without defect. And so Jesus became that. He didn't abolish the law, he fulfilled it. And then we go on in here, and it says even more regarding our need for righteousness in order to obtain heaven. It says here, verse 20, for I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Wow. Well, the scribes and the Pharisees were just known for fulfilling the law and doing everything according to the law and following it and considering that their righteousness. But what Jesus does here is he says, your righteousness has to surpass their righteousness. And it's interesting if we look at the context here, which I think is real important. Matthew 5:21 through the end of the chapter, and even beyond that, actually, what he begins to do here is he begins to talk about matters of the heart. It's not just righteousness of doing just the right deeds, but all of a sudden he says in verse 21, you had heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. So Jesus talks about this righteousness, and he says, your righteousness has to surpass that of the scribes and the Pharisees. It's not just a matter of doing things on the outside, looking good on the outside. Your righteousness has to be a righteousness that actually affects your heart condition. Not only, well, I ain't killed anybody. It's not just that, but it's actually controlling your temper, your anger, and living in a way where you're not just full of this hostility, actually have a murderous heart. And so what Jesus talks about here in saying that your righteousness has to fulfill that of the Pharisees and the scribes is that we're looking at here now a righteousness that goes beyond just duties and things and fulfilling and sacrifices, and it's something that creates a new person from within. And that's the message that he's bringing. That's the good news that we've got that we're looking at in these Gospels.